Hello and welcome to another video lecture for the Regional Debate Development Program. This is a video series aimed at helping debaters across New Zealand improve their debating faster and help them gain skills to become better debaters. In this lecture, what am I going to cover? I'm going to cover off how you should take notes. Sounds like a really simple thing. Turns out, lots of people don't actually get it right across the country. So if you have note taking down, which you'll work out in a moment when I start talking about it, that's fine. You can skip it to the next lecture because I do know lots of debaters do have this down. However, why do I make a lecture on it? I think this is the fundamentally biggest improvement one can make from a single lecture. Like, I don't actually think there are any other lectures, maybe outside of how to do substantives, that will give you this much improvement. So I do want to teach it to anyone who hasn't learned it. On that note, the thing that you should know is what I don't want to see is I see lots of debaters have full sentences written out in paragraphs across their page. Is that fine for a full speech that you would do right over weeks? Yes. The thing is, debating is kind of different in that regard, right? Debating, you have a limited prep time. You sit down with your team, and you only have a few kind of, it might be half an hour, it might be 45 minutes, an hour, depending on kind of what format and what region you're from, to prep your case. And because of that, it means that you don't have time to write it out. So you need to do this method. This will help you fill out your time if you're struggling to speak all the way to the end of your time. This will help you, become better at debating. It'll help you be able to change your speech on the fly. I do flag, though, like I said in my first lecture, there is a down bit. This is probably one of the bigger down bits. It's the hardest thing to get on in your debate if you're not already using it. But promise me that you will stick with it, because it's probably the most worthwhile thing. Okay, that was a huge opening explanation, but that's because I really want you guys to stick with it. Here's how we do it. Okay, disclaimer. This is much easier to teach on a whiteboard than it is to teach in a slideshow, so it may look a little bit messy, but I'm going to track you through it. Let's chat about rebuttal, because that's probably the first thing you're going to be talking about in your speeches. How do we structure rebuttal? This is obviously not the only way to structure your speeches. This is just a good way to do it. I draw a line down the middle. I put on one side what the other team is saying. I put on one side what we are saying. Some people like to put affirmative and negate it. Sometimes I get those mixed up, so it's much easier for me to say, that's what they said, and I know it's always going to be right. Okay, the top half of my speech in rebuttal, I'm going to be dealing with, one thing before I get into that. Not all of these words may make sense to you. That's okay. The substantive, how to do a substantive and how to do rebuttal lectures will cover off what do these words mean. I'm more concerned about what the broad overall structure and layout of your pages. So I've used the words that you'll use. Don't worry if you don't exactly understand it now. You will in lectures soon to come. So back to what I was saying. At the top, I kind of defend our case. Anything that I'm doing to defend us. So I say, okay, what did we originally say? Then I draw a line across the page and I write anything that they said in response to it. And I draw a line down, and I'm like, okay, what's our response to that? So do you see how that works? The arrows kind of guide my eyes, so that when I'm up there, if I glance down at my page, I follow the arrow, and I'm at the next thing I need, right? It means that it doesn't matter where I'm looking at, or how messy my page gets, I can always just follow the arrow, and it'll take me to hopefully the start of the line, which I need to start reading. The second piece. This is going to deal with any rebuttal that you're rebutting from things that they said that are their case, right? So they might make a claim of something. This is an attack on your case. What do we say? It's our response to that. It might be a singular response, but also sometimes I have multiple responses. So as you can see here, I've got arrows. I might be response 1 to this is such and such. Arrow down, response 2 is such and such. Hopefully that makes sense. However, the key thing I want you to take note of is I'm not writing out full sentences. I'm trying to write summaries of different things. I'm trying to write bullet points, kind of a few words that are going to prompt me into it. I understand that people will need more to begin with. It's a big shift coming from fully written speeches to not. That's totally fine. I understand And also, if you're worried about stumbling, if I see you as a judge, like tripping over your words every now and again, you're giving the structure a go, I'll be immensely impressed. Like, massive respect for the transition to do this. I think every judge that you'll meet will feel the same way. I wouldn't worry about it. I think every debate has been through it. So don't feel concerned when you get to it. So what you want to be having is these kind of bullet points in here that are doing what you need to. For me, I've kind of got down to doing it in 3 or 4 words. I'll be like, you know, our response is, let's say I'm responding by saying like, they've just talked about how they're getting an economic benefit, and I'll be like, I want to talk about how child suffering from big companies exploiting their labor is really bad. I will write, children harmed, exploitative companies. And I'll look at that and I'll be like, okay, I know what I'm talking about now. I'm talking about it for the next 20 seconds. That's the end goal. That took me a long time to get all the way down there. But just start back here when you've got a few more things to say. But just think about that as your end goal for what you want to get to. Perfect. That covers off rebuttal. Understand that it was messy, but as you practice it with time and you get less and less words on the page, that's going to be better and better. So 2 things to remember: use your arrows, less words. We said, they said. Those are the things you should remember. Perfect. How do you do substantives? Also, this is how I lay out my framing. This is how I lay out my models. Anything else in the debate kind of fits into a similar structure. The rebuttal is the only one that has that odd, we said, they said, 2 sides to the coin. Obviously, once again, using the words from the How to Do Substantives lecture, you'll learn about that momentarily if you don't know them. It's more, once again, about the things. The different, like, structure rather than the actual words. Perfect. Without further ado, let's get into it. Let's highlight a few key things up here. Firstly, you can see that some of my things are much bigger than others and are attempted to be bolded. My title, I'll often write that up at the top of my page in big, bold letters because I want to know that I'm moving into a new point. That's probably something pretty important I want to signify. I've stopped talking about one thing. I'm like, big title. I'm like, okay, Judge, I'm moving into my second point on this. That's why that's so big. The other things that are big are your context, mechanisms, outcomes, and impacts. There should also be a roadmap in there. It's just been left out this time. But you'll get to that in the lecture coming onwards. So each of these things are a thing that you should flag to the judge. So any big changes in your speech. So when you move into your mechanisms, which are just your reasons why something's true. Hey, Judge, I'm going to give you my mechanisms now. Judge, I'm going to move on to my outcomes. You don't have to say, Judge. You can say, now I'm going to give you my impacts, right? These are things that you should signpost, like let the judge know that you've moved into a new section. That's why. That's the first thing. The second thing is I am just using the very similar structure that I had used in rebuttal, probably the key takeout you should take away from this lecture, which is use short bullet points. I'll be like, the title of my mechanisms, why something's true, and I'll be like, okay, here's why that's true, and then I'll be like, here's why that's true, and like, I'll follow my chain of logic down the arrows of the page until I hit the final thing. I'm like, okay, I've proved that thing now. Often you'll need to ask yourself why a bunch of times to prove something's true. I'll talk about it more in the lecture on substantives. But just know that kind of as you go through each of your reasons, you know, just kind of arrows down until you prove the thing's true, then move on to your second reason, then you head up. Here's my second mechanism. Hopefully that makes a lot of sense. I get that this is confusing. I get it's not the easiest thing to lecture on PowerPoint. I've done my best to attempt to put this together in a format that's going to make sense for you. With that in mind, your key takeaways from this lecture should be use bullet points, use less words, and make sure anything you want to header up is nice and big. Divide up your sections. Perfect. On a final note, that I just want to kind of pass it to everyone. I know I've said it a lot, but I'm going to say it one more time. This is a big shift. So stick with it, do your absolute best. You're going to be great. And once you get it, you'll be like, wow, I can fill my speech times. I'm like a much better debater. I can pivot real quickly on when I need to change things. I can integrate better with my team. Like, this is going to change the way you fundamentally debate. So please stick to it. It's the most important lecture I'll give, which is why I told you that at the beginning. Secondly, I'm going to tell you that this is personal the way you structure points and how you write your notes. This is the baseline structure I was taught by my coaches many years ago. It's the structure that I've started with, it's the structure I teach to every new debater I coach, and it's been pretty successful in all the debaters that I have coached and in my own usage of it. However, there are lots of things that you might tweak that make things better for you. Some people love to use highlighters to highlight things. Some people like to use sticky notes to layer their mechs on top of each other. All of those things are personal choices. You can look at what other debates do and go, oh, that's a great idea. I'm going to steal that. Those are all acceptable, but I would encourage you to get this down, make sure you're nailing this, and then tweak it over time. And eventually it'll end up at a very personal thing, because the way you take notes often is the way you speak. So it's very personal to you. We don't want every debater in New Zealand having the same notes. Some people have really beautiful notes, like some of my friends that I debate with. I have terribly ugly, messy notes that are all over the page and are in big block writing so I can read them. Where I'm going to glance down at my page every now and again to make sure I'm actually saying what I'm meant to. So that's what I'm saying. It's personal, everyone's different. Thank you on that note so much for tuning in to this lecture. I really appreciate it. I wish you the best of luck in practicing this and training this. I encourage you to go out there with the notes that you've hopefully taken on this lecture and practice this in a debate. You could be at a debate club, do a practice round. You could be at home, do a practice speech and write your notes out that way. All of those ways are good to get better at this. Wish you the best of luck. I hope your debating gets as good as possible, as quickly as possible, because that's what these videos are for. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks so much for tuning in.